Hello, my name is Chris from Select Characters, and we're here today to bring you a review of XCOM 2, but before we do that, I want to ask something of you. If you, at the end of watching this review, think, I quite like that content, please consider subscribing to us, costs you nothing, and helps out the channel an awful lot. Now, here to talk to me about XCOM 2 today is our very own Sam Yates. Hi, man.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, you've been playing XCOM 2 an awful lot lately. I think you even finished it maybe more than once?
No, not more than once. I finished it one time, but I definitely restarted it way more than once.
That must be it. Now, let's just start with the very first question, because maybe some people watching this have no idea what an XCOM actually is. So could you tell us what an XCOM is? And after that, could you tell us what an XCOM 2 is?
Sure, I have no idea what XCOM stands for, but...
Fantastic.
Yeah, I actually don't know. That's a great question, but basically you are the Earth Defense Force against the alien invasion forces. In the first one, the aliens, it's the first time they've ever shown up, and we're gearing up and getting all our tech ready, trying to push them out. XCOM 2, the aliens have kind of taken over, and we are the small resistance freedom fighter movement coming out of the shadows to try and take our planet back, I guess, basically.
Alright, but from what little I've seen of the game, Earth seems to be in a pretty decent shape after the aliens came and took over, so why are we fighting them now?
See, that's a great question, and that's also the same question I had, because we seem to have 20 years of peace and prosperity. If you get into the story a little more, in the middle of it, it sort of turns out that, okay, maybe they're not such great people after all, but without going into too much detail, maybe that's not the worst thing either, but, you know, on a basic, I guess, sense of if you're tied to this exact form of this bag of juice, then maybe aliens taking over is something that we want to fight against. So I just went with it and just kind of embraced it, even though to be assimilated into an alien race would be, like, better to me,
Yeah.
but not to the characters in the game, and that's what it's all about.
Alright, so willful suspension of disbelief is definitely a factor here.
Yeah, but you're not there for the story anyway. I mean, not really.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before we talk about the gameplay, I do want to stick to story just a little while longer if you don't mind. Is the story good enough on its own? Like, is it serviceable? Does it actually go somewhere, and does it do enough to keep you hooked until the end of the game?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's enough. I'm not going to say it's great because it's not great. It's very point for point, sort of standard. It's like, it's just there in the background. I'm not like doing things in the game to try and advance the story or find out what happens next, but it kind of moves along at its own pace. And you pick up those details and you go, okay, cool, that's neat. And, you know, leading up to a grand culmination in a final battle, which is all it really has to do. And I think it does that serviceably.
Alright, well, there's quite enough of that then. It's serviceable, but it's not fantastic. It just does enough to sort of propel the story, the game forward and the gameplay forward. So, graphics. What does it look like? Is it a huge improvement over the first game?
I think it looks great. It's not a huge improvement. I think it still looks just as good. I'm sure it looks better just by the fact that that other game came out years ago and this one came out more recently. But it's not better enough that I'm blown away by how good the graphics are or anything like that.
The game's UI, there's obviously a new UI, you know, every game has one. Is this one better than the original XCOM one?
That depends. It was sort of, I like this one better because it is more focused away from the controller, so getting to things is easier and seeing them laid out is easier. Visually, it's almost exactly the same. The iconography is very similar. You have the little ticks of health for the people, and navigating and getting to where you need to isn't bad, but some of that stuff can feel like it's hidden away when you want to go a little off the beaten path.
Right.
For example, if you want to view one of your soldiers in the armory, it can be a few clicks too many removed. But without all those trappings, it does sort of tend to become more like a spreadsheet, which I don't think they want that. They want it to be more flash and dazzle. But
Right.
as far as getting your hands on the things you actually need to do and when you need to do them, it's pretty intuitive, and sometimes you'll be in a screen and you can access another screen with little buttons at the bottom, so you don't have to, even though those aren't related. I guess what I'm saying is when you're looking at your dudes, there's a button at the bottom that says engineering, so you don't have to go all the way back out and then all the way back into engineering. You can just jump right over.
Right. Okay, and speaking of things that you need to do, can you give a quick run through the gameplay?
Sure. You are XCOM. You have a squad of soldiers. The gameplay is broken into two components. You have your overworld map, where there's a ticking timer at the top, and the aliens are gradually taking over the Earth, where they're working on what they call the Avatar Project. Mm-hmm. And then outside of that, which is a resource management, kind of building your base, deciding what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to structure your resistance force. That's your whole top level kind of, I guess you could call it like a strategy layer. Underneath that, you have the actual boots on the ground in combat. You take a number of soldiers out and you work your way forward. Turn-based system. You have a certain number of movement points and action points that you use to shoot and fight the enemy. And the missions vary. There's different objectives and things like that. But
such as?
Let's see. You've got VIP escort missions. You've got missions where you need to run in and blow something up. You've got some other kinds where you have to hack something. Oh, wait, there's also missions where you have to rescue civilians.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a pretty good variety there. It's enough to get you through.
All right, pretty good. Let's see here. You can make your own team, essentially. You level up your own team. So there's a bit of an RPG slant to the gameplay. Is that really deep? How far does that go?
The extent of that is basically the fact that you... Hold on 1 second.
Start again when you want.
Stop calling me.
What are you trying to do?
All right. I was getting a phone call, but it comes through the computer, too. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? Unit customization, right? Or RPG
how deep
aspects of
do the
leveling.
RPG elements of the game go?
The RPG elements aren't incredibly deep. It's more like a character customization, but the skill tree is two-sided, and as you level up, there's, I want to say 6 or 7 different ranks between rookie and colonel. You pick one side of the tree or the other. So every level up is a very binary choice between two abilities. Outside of that, you're only really upgrading people by changing what weapons they're carrying, what armor they're carrying, their utility items, more of like a loadout configuration.
Right.
But none of that is very stats heavy or trying to allocate points in different ways. It's just a very, like I said, a binary choice between two skills is the bulk of all of that kind of progression.
Right, so it doesn't really have a big impact on the gameplay itself. It's just little bits of customization here and there.
Well, it's different skills, so that can have a enormous impact. It's stuff like, okay, this guy can now shoot twice, or this guy or your sniper can now kill everybody in a cone. The abilities have an enormous impact on gameplay, and what you choose to do sort of changes how you're going to use that soldier when you are in the field and when you are in the middle of combat.
Right.
But it's just not deep, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Right. So the game's difficulty, is it actually a hard game? Does it get progressively harder, or, is it just hard from the get-go? Is it, what I'm trying to say here, what I'm trying to gauge here, more like, how forgiving is the game to newcomers, and how unforgiving is it to returning players?
It is a difficult game. Where I'm still trying to collect my thoughts on it is exactly where that difficulty stems from. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it comes from just needing to know about certain things or certain ways that you can manipulate the environment, certain tools you can use, what different abilities do. I think a lot of the difficulty comes in from a familiarity with the game's systems.
Right.
So it's not conventionally difficult. Like, it's not difficult from an execution stance, and it feels like when you first step into that, the gap between what you know and what you don't know is so large that you just get smashed.
Right.
And it also makes the early game incredibly difficult because the tool set you have is very small. Mm-hmm. But as you move forward in the game, and as you kind of move towards the mid game, and then you move towards the end game with a proper layout and a proper build strategy, it becomes a lot easier and a lot more manageable. It never becomes all the way easy. If you get complacent, the game will tell you like that you messed up, and it will punish you for it. But as long as you're paying attention and you're keeping things in mind, it's not incredibly difficult, but it appears difficult on the face because so much of that difficulty is stacked in the beginning of the game and in the beginning of you approaching it and starting to play it.
Right. And the paying attention bit, what you just talked about, is something that I found pretty hard because the game's pacing in the battles is actually really, really slow. Is that something that impacted your enjoyment of the game? Is that like a legitimate concern you bring to the table when you're recommending this to other people?
Yeah, I think so. If I what I would like to see from strategy games in general is to give you the ability to pare down on all that extra stuff. This game has pauses that aren't like that, but I'll get to that in a second. What they should do is give you the ability to, because when you first see slow motion sniper shots and you first see people running around, it all looks so cool. But as you eventually become desensitized to that, you don't want to see it anymore. You just want the game to click by faster and faster. So ideally, you'd have an interface where you could go from that fully animated, beautiful rendition to basically strip it all the way down to, when I move a guy, I just want him to disappear and reappear. And so you could just blaze right through it. But they do not give you that past a certain level. The effects that you can do to change the pacing of the actual game are basically non-existent. You can turn off some of the cinematic cameras, but not all of them. And so that's bad. From a default level, I just don't personally prefer it. I like my turn-based games to click forward. I want them to only stop when I stop because I'm trying to think about something.
I get that. I don't really mind a little flash when I'm playing my games, but it's like the problem I had with XCOM 2 was that everything from the way that the soldiers move to the way they jump over stuff to the way they line up their shots and actually shoot the enemies was really, really slow, and that just took the fun out of the game for me, at least after a while of playing that, after the initial like honeymoon phase, if you want to call it that. Once that is all done and past you, it just becomes a bit of an annoyance.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. And so they don't have the tools to pull that stuff out. And then in addition, there are a whole bunch of pauses in there that I put a mod in that's supposed to strip a bunch of them out, but there's designed pauses in 800 different steps within that game, like 2-second pause after this, 1-second pause after this. And it just stops the game from clicking forward at a pace that you want it to.
Just slugging it down even more.
Yeah, I guess I understand that because, like I said, it will punish you for not paying attention, but at the same time, I'd rather move along at my own pace. Like, if you could strip it all the way down to just icons or something, I would be fine with that, because by that point, when I've reached that point in a game, I'm not paying attention to the animations anymore anyway. I'm never saying, whoa, that looks cool. I'm way more mentally invested in trying to figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah, I get you. So, anything else you want to add about the gameplay?
The gameplay, it's a game about wiggle room. I mean, overall and in general, it's a game about how far can I push this thing? How far down can I go and still be able to come back up? Because you're constantly going to have to make trade-offs and sacrifices, but never trading off so far that you can't recover. Mm-hmm. And the game is just like that. It's trying to find the right square to get around and find the right angle to shoot somebody. And, it's doing all of that and feeling that constraint and trying to find the optimal way to handle it, but then breaking out of it, coming above it, and rising above that because you get more powerful, you get new gear. All of a sudden, the things that were limiting you are out of your way, and that feels great. And you kind of stampede ahead, but then all of a sudden you realize that you're in a different sort of confinement. Like now there's a different sort of problem that you're trying to work around. And if that sounds like an exercise that you enjoy, the game is pretty good about being fun in that regard, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was it?
Yeah. I guess that's all. That's my main thing.
All right, cool. One last thing before we have to wrap this up. Sound. What's the soundtrack like? How did the guns sound like? What does the game sound like? And does it sound good?
Yes, I guess. I honestly don't know. Maybe that's a bad
I realize
thing.
that you are maybe the wrong person to ask because you don't really pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah, the space weapons sound real spacey, and the guns sound like guns. I don't know.
Cool. All right, yeah. So, all right then. Just to wrap this thing up, would this be something you recommend at full price?
I would, if it depends on how the mod support shakes out. I think right now, if I was planning on a second playthrough, I'm waiting for the mod support to come. I'm waiting for your long war mod, the equivalent of that for this game. Until then, I mean, just wait, I think. Because it's still buggy, there's still performance issues, there's still a lot of bad stuff going on in the mix, and just general quality of life stuff that's kind of a bummer. So until mods come out and they fix that stuff, or there's a, what are they called? Overhaul? Until there's an overhaul, I'd say just wait.
Alright then. Well, that's XCOM 2 for you. Thank you very much for watching and listening to this video. Again, if you liked what we're doing here, please consider subscribing to us. We've got a podcast here every Wednesday where we talk about video games endlessly and try to solve philosophical questions that nobody really wants us to ask or answer. So yeah, that's basically what we do here, in addition to reviews and opinion videos and first impression stuff. My name is Chris Anderson. There's links in the description to all our social media and stuff. You can send us a message, or you can just leave a comment in this video. We will always read it, and we will try to respond to everything that we get. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.